150 Russian warships, 120 aircraft, 15,000 personnel. Putin just launched July Storm, the largest Russian naval exercise in years, across 4 strategic waterways. But while Putin stages this maritime theater, NATO just delivered a financial blow that exposes who really controls this conflict. This isn't just about ships versus money. It's about 2 completely different approaches to modern warfare. Putin believes in dramatic displays of military hardware, massive exercises designed to intimidate and project power. But the numbers tell a story Putin doesn't want you to see. $43 billion in NATO military aid pledged for 2025 alone. Over 50 billion euros already delivered in 2024. The economic analysis we've obtained reveals exactly why Putin's naval show is actually a sign of strategic desperation, and how NATO's financial strategy is designed to end this conflict on their terms. The July Storm begins with unprecedented scale across 4 strategic waterways, Putin's largest naval demonstration since the war began. The exercise mobilizes 150 Russian warships, 120 aircraft, and 15,000 military personnel across the Pacific, Arctic, Baltic, and Caspian Seas in a coordinated 5-day demonstration of naval power. Led by Navy Chief Admiral Alexander Moiseev, the maneuvers test long-range strike capabilities, anti-submarine warfare, drone combat readiness, and responses to unconventional threats, according to Russian Defense Ministry announcements. The exercise includes Russia's most advanced naval assets, from nuclear submarines to surface combatants, designed to project power across multiple theaters simultaneously. But this massive naval demonstration reveals Putin's fundamental misunderstanding of modern warfare and the regime's growing isolation from strategic reality. While Russia commits enormous resources to staging maritime theater, the real conflict in Ukraine demonstrates that naval power has limited relevance to the land war that's bleeding Russia to death. The exercise consumes fuel, ammunition, and personnel that could be used in Ukraine, where Russian forces desperately need reinforcement and resupply. Contrast, comparison. This naval theater contrasts sharply with NATO's practical, results-oriented approach to supporting Ukraine. While Russia stages expensive maritime parades, NATO allies deliver concrete military aid that directly impacts battlefield outcomes. The cost of July Storm could have equipped thousands of Russian soldiers with modern gear or provided crucial air defense systems for Russian territory. But the July Storm exercise also reveals critical vulnerabilities in Russian naval capabilities that Putin hoped to hide. Defense analysts note that many ships participating in the exercise are Soviet-era vessels that require extensive maintenance and support to remain operational. The geographic dispersion of the exercise across 4 different seas demonstrates Russia's inability to concentrate naval power in any single theater, diluting fleet effectiveness. Putin's naval spectacle masks the reality of Russian military decline. But NATO's response reveals a completely different understanding of how modern conflicts are won. While Russian ships parade across the seas, NATO delivers a financial blow that dwarfs any naval demonstration. $43 billion in military aid pledged to Ukraine for 2025 alone. According to Militarny reports, NATO allies have committed to providing $43 billion in military assistance to Ukraine for 2025, representing a significant increase from the over 50 billion euros already delivered in 2024. This aid package includes advanced air defense systems, long-range precision weapons, armored vehicles, ammunition, and comprehensive training programs designed to enhance Ukrainian military capabilities. The funding comes from multiple sources across the alliance, with European allies taking an increasingly prominent role as the United States adjusts its support strategy under the Trump administration. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte emphasizes that this represents the fastest pace of military assistance in the alliance's history, demonstrating unprecedented unity and commitment to Ukrainian victory. But this massive financial commitment represents more than just military aid. It's economic warfare designed to bleed Russia to death while building Ukrainian strength. Unlike Russia's expensive naval exercises that consume resources without producing lasting military advantage, NATO aid directly improves Ukrainian battlefield capabilities while imposing unsustainable costs on Russian forces. Each advanced weapon system provided to Ukraine forces Russia to develop expensive countermeasures or accept increased losses. The contrast between NATO's $43 billion aid package and Russia's July Storm exercise perfectly illustrates the difference between substance and theater in modern warfare. Russia's naval exercise costs millions of dollars and produces impressive visuals but creates no lasting military advantage. NATO's aid package costs billions but fundamentally alters the balance of power in Ukraine by providing capabilities that directly impact battlefield outcomes. Russian naval exercises last 5 days and then end. NATO military aid continues flowing month after month, year after year. The exercise demonstrates Russian naval power for a few days. The aid package builds Ukrainian military strength permanently, but NATO's financial strategy goes beyond simply outspending Russia. It's designed to create a self-reinforcing cycle that accelerates Russian military decline. The Pentagon's announcement of an additional $322 million in military packages demonstrates the alliance's ability to rapidly adjust support based on battlefield needs. European allies are simultaneously increasing their own defense spending to NATO's 5% GDP target, creating a massive expansion of Western military industrial capacity. NATO's financial strategy reveals a sophisticated understanding of modern warfare economics. But the alliance's next move shows an even deeper commitment to Ukrainian victory. European allies accelerate weapons delivery as NATO agrees to historic defense spending increases. The alliance transforms from reactive support to proactive military mobilization. The Atlantic Council reports that NATO has agreed to a new defense spending target of 5% of GDP, representing the most significant increase in alliance military spending since the Cold War. This target includes 3.5% for direct military spending and 1.5% for defense industrial capacity expansion, ensuring NATO can sustain long-term support for Ukraine while building capabilities for future conflicts. European allies are rushing to deliver advanced American weapons systems to Ukraine, with Germany, Poland, and Baltic states leading efforts to transfer sophisticated air defense and artillery systems. But this European military mobilization represents more than just increased support for Ukraine. It's the emergence of a militarized Europe that Putin's actions created but cannot control. The 5% GDP defense spending target will generate hundreds of billions of dollars in additional European military capacity over the next decade, fundamentally altering the global balance of power. European defense industrial capacity expansion ensures the continent can sustain military operations independently of American support, reducing American influence while increasing European strategic autonomy. This European military mobilization contrasts sharply with Russia's declining capabilities and shrinking alliance structure. While Europe increases defense spending and expands military industrial capacity, Russia struggles to maintain current production levels under international sanctions. European allies coordinate sophisticated weapons deliveries and training programs. Russia increasingly relies on obsolete equipment and poorly trained conscripts. But the most significant aspect of European military mobilization is its permanence. These changes will survive the current conflict and reshape European security for decades. The defense industrial capacity being built to support Ukraine will remain in place long after the war ends, giving Europe unprecedented military production capabilities. The institutional changes required to coordinate weapons deliveries and military aid are creating new forms of European defense cooperation that bypass traditional NATO structures. European military mobilization reveals the long-term strategic consequences of Putin's miscalculation, but the economic implications of this arms race show why Russia cannot win a sustained confrontation. The numbers reveal a harsh reality. Putin cannot escape. Russia burns resources on military theater, while NATO builds sustainable military advantage. Economic analysis reveals that Russia's July Storm naval exercise costs approximately $50 million in fuel, ammunition, maintenance, and personnel expenses for a 5-day demonstration that produces no lasting military advantage. In contrast, NATO's $43 billion aid package for 2025 represents sustained investment in capabilities that permanently alter the battlefield balance in Ukraine's favor. MSN reports that European allies are stepping on the gas in funding and support, with the EU ramping up air defenses and implementing new sanctions targeting Russia's energy sector and shadow fleet operations. But this economic warfare reveals the fundamental asymmetry that dooms Putin's strategy from the start. Russia's economy, even before sanctions, represented less than 2% of global GDP, while NATO allies collectively control over 50% of world economic output. The alliance can sustain $43 billion in annual military aid to Ukraine without significant economic strain, while Russia struggles to maintain basic military operations under international sanctions. NATO's combined defense industrial capacity dwarfs Russian production capabilities, ensuring the alliance can outproduce Russia in any sustained arms race. The contrast between Russian and NATO economic strategies reveals two completely different approaches to modern conflict. Russia treats military spending as a zero-sum competition, believing impressive displays of force will intimidate opponents into submission. NATO views military aid as an investment that generates compound returns by building allied capabilities and degrading enemy strength simultaneously. But the economic warfare extends beyond direct military spending to encompass the entire structure of the global economy, where Russia faces insurmountable disadvantages. International sanctions have cut Russia off from advanced technologies, financial systems, and markets essential for modern military production. The French foreign minister's comments about new sanctions targeting Russia's energy sector and shadow fleet demonstrate the alliance's ability to continuously tighten economic pressure on Russian resources. European defense spending increases create new industrial capacity that will persist long after the current conflict, permanently altering the global balance of military production. But the true revelation comes when you understand what these numbers mean for Putin's long-term survival. NATO's financial strategy reveals a sophisticated understanding of modern conflict economics. The alliance has transformed economic superiority into strategic advantage. The sustained nature of NATO's $43 billion commitment demonstrates the alliance's ability to maintain support indefinitely, while Russia exhausts its resources on unsustainable military operations. Unlike Russia's boom-and-bust approach to military spending, NATO's aid flows consistently month after month, creating predictable capabilities growth for Ukrainian forces while forcing Russia to constantly adapt to new threats. The diversification of aid sources across multiple NATO members ensures that no single country bears an unsustainable burden while creating redundancy that makes the aid flow virtually impossible to disrupt. But NATO's strategic patience exposes the fundamental weakness of Putin's time-sensitive strategy and the regime's growing desperation as resources dwindle. Putin's approach depends on achieving quick victories before Western support can take effect, but NATO's sustained aid ensures Ukrainian capabilities improve faster than Russian forces can adapt. Putin's strategy requires constant escalation to maintain momentum, while NATO's approach becomes more effective as Ukrainian forces gain experience with advanced Western weapons systems. NATO's strategic patience contrasts sharply with Russia's increasingly frantic attempts to achieve decisive results before economic constraints force a halt to operations. While Russia stages expensive naval exercises and launches costly offensive operations, NATO methodically builds Ukrainian capabilities through sustained, predictable support. But the most significant aspect of NATO's strategic patience is how it transforms the conflict from a military competition into an economic endurance test that Russia cannot win. NATO's coordinated approach allows member nations to specialize in different types of support, creating efficiencies that maximize aid effectiveness while minimizing individual country burdens. NATO's strategic patience reveals the alliance's confidence in its ultimate victory. But the final revelation shows how Putin's naval theater actually accelerates his own defeat. The July Storm exercise's scale and geographic dispersion represent Putin's attempt to project global power, but the absence of significant allied participation reveals Russia's strategic isolation and inability to build a credible coalition against NATO. Unlike NATO exercises that regularly include multiple allied nations and demonstrate genuine interoperability, Russia's naval demonstration relies entirely on Russian assets and capabilities. The exercise's timing coincides with increased NATO naval cooperation in the Baltic and Black Seas, highlighting the contrast between Russia's solo performance and NATO's multilateral coordination. Military analysts note that the exercise consumes resources that could support actual military operations while producing no tangible strategic benefits beyond propaganda value. But the July Storm exercise actually accelerates Putin's strategic isolation by demonstrating Russia's inability to attract meaningful allied support for confrontation with NATO. The exercise's solo nature exposes the failure of Putin's efforts to build a credible anti-Western coalition, leaving Russia to face NATO's combined power alone. International observers note that even countries with grievances against the West, such as China and India, refuse to provide military support for Russian operations, revealing the limits of authoritarian partnerships. The exercise's resource consumption weakens Russia's actual military capabilities while providing no strategic benefits, accelerating the decline Putin sought to reverse. Putin's isolated naval demonstration contrasts sharply with NATO's multilateral approach to military exercises and operations, which regularly demonstrate genuine alliance cooperation and interoperability. But Putin's strategic isolation is becoming more pronounced as the costs of association with Russian aggression become clear to potential partners, and the benefits of opposing NATO prove illusory. Even Belarus, Putin's most reliable ally, faces growing domestic pressure and economic strain from supporting Russian military operations, making Lukashenko's position increasingly precarious. Putin's strategic isolation reveals the fundamental weakness of his approach to international relations, but the final revelation shows how his naval theater strategy is actually ensuring NATO's long-term dominance. Putin's naval exercise strategy has backfired completely, strengthening NATO while weakening Russia. The July Storm demonstration accelerates the very outcomes Putin sought to prevent. The July Storm exercise's resource consumption and propaganda focus have diverted Russian military assets from actual combat operations while providing NATO with valuable intelligence about Russian capabilities and weaknesses. The exercise's timing and scale prompted NATO allies to accelerate defense spending increases and weapons deliveries to Ukraine, creating a direct causal link between Putin's demonstration and enhanced Western military capabilities. But the most significant consequence of Putin's naval theater strategy is how it has permanently strengthened NATO while accelerating Russian decline in ways that cannot be reversed. The exercise prompted European allies to commit to 5% GDP defense spending, creating hundreds of billions of dollars in new military capacity that will persist long after the current conflict ends. Putin's attempt to intimidate NATO through naval demonstrations actually convinced alliance members of the need for increased military preparedness, resulting in the largest expansion of Western defense capabilities since the Cold War. The permanent advantages NATO has gained from Putin's naval theater strategy contrast sharply with the temporary and illusory benefits Russia received from the July Storm demonstration. While Russia achieved a few days of impressive visuals and propaganda coverage, NATO gained permanent increases in defense spending, industrial capacity, and military cooperation that will shape global security for decades. Putin's short-term thinking and focus on symbolic gestures has created long-term strategic advantages for the very alliance he sought to weaken. But the ultimate irony of Putin's naval strategy is how it has ensured NATO's permanent dominance in the very areas where Russia sought to demonstrate strength. The July Storm exercise's resource consumption has weakened Russian naval capabilities, while NATO's response has strengthened Western naval power through increased cooperation and capability sharing. European defense industrial expansion triggered by Putin's demonstrations will produce more advanced naval systems than Russia can develop under sanctions and resource constraints. The exercise's failure to achieve strategic objectives while consuming enormous resources has become a template for Russian strategic failure that NATO can exploit in future confrontations. Putin's naval theater has essentially subsidized NATO's military modernization while depleting Russian resources, creating a permanent strategic advantage for the alliance that will persist regardless of future political changes in member countries. Putin's naval strategy has achieved the opposite of its intended goals, permanently strengthening NATO while weakening Russia. The July Storm exercise will be remembered as the moment Putin's strategic miscalculations became irreversible.